how was the so-called election on January the 7th? Due to the boycott of the main opposition Bangladesh Nationalist Party, BNP, and 62 pro-democracy political parties, there was no interest in the outcome of the January the 7th election. Rather, whether the people will completely boycott the election on the call of the opposition parties was at the centre of all discussion. After seizing power by vote rigging in 2014 and 2018, the ruling Awami League was orchestrating electoral fraud again in 2024. In the last 3 months, more than 27,000 leaders and activists of BNP were arrested, including the Secretary General and other senior leaders, by filing false cases. Many were victims of torture and assault in police custody. The opposition activists were sentenced using the servile members of the judiciary. The ruling Awami League propped up dummy candidates to ensure fake competition between the ruling party and its other factions, with the aim of making the election look acceptable and participatory to the international community. To showcase voter turnout, state allowances like senior citizen allowance and student allowance were threatened with cancellation unless the recipient showed up at the polling centres and participated in this farce of an election. Government employees and Ansar members were ordered to ensure attendance at polling stations. Awami League did not even hesitate to threaten physical torture or deprivation of basic facilities of gas, water, electricity unless people voted. A staged spree of violence, arson and murders started, creating false competition among themselves. Awami League started blaming the opposition after instigating arson and violence themselves. On election night, ballot boxes were stuffed by ruling party activists. Polling stations were set on fire and violence broke out between Awami League and its allies. Voters were lured by bribery in a futile attempt to increase number. From the morning of election day, unprecedented response to shun the dummy election was seen among the people. People's resolve for democracy and voting rights could not be swayed by various threats and temptations. Hasina's government was sent a message through silent rejection in boycotting the election. Polling stations were empty all over the country. Dogs, goats and monkeys were seen roaming around. Election officials were seen sitting around idly and waiting for voters. The fascist Awami League government began its traditional vote-stealing campaign. Fake lines were created to show election observers. Just before foreign observers showed up, the same group of people repeatedly came and stood in the polling line to try and impart an appearance of voter participation. Once the observers left, the ballots began to be stamped by Awami League activists to run up the number of votes cast. The same person cast multiple votes. Children also voted. Far from stopping these irregularities, the Election Commission officials themselves got involved in vote tampering and started preparing the results desired by Sheikh Hasina even before the vote started. Despite the empty polling stations and people boycotting the vote, Awami League's captive and politicized election commission began to show artificial number of voter turnout. Where the polling rate was evidently way less than 5%, the Election Commission first claimed 18.5%, then 27.15%, and at the end of voting period they made an audacious claim of 41%. Even on the Election Commission's own official dashboard, the polling rate at 9 p.m. at the end of the polling period was 28%. Just like the irregularities and manipulations in the way voting was conducted, the claimed percentage of voter turnout was a sham. Some polling stations showed more than 100% of votes. This is how the shambolic chapter of an election was held across the country through the spontaneous rejection of the people of Bangladesh. Awami League is forming a one-party parliament with independent candidates elected from within their own party, and the Awami League-controlled so-called opposition Jatiyo Party. Bangladesh now stands at an inflection point. One way is by taking away people's voting rights, human rights, right to a decent life, robbing banks, laundering money, and colluding with the authoritarian world to destroy the economy built by people's blood and sweat. The goal is to establish a one-party regime to ensure their own continued prosperity, not the interests of the people. Another way is to involve the people in a fair, neutral, inclusive, and participatory election, ensure human rights, build sustainable economy, and work together with the democratic world, where the lost voting rights and fundamental freedoms of the people could be restored. Which path do you want Bangladesh to take?